co-creating a world filled with positive possibilities while leading by example, My Power of One takes a stand for kindness. In The Wizard of One, Sue Vicory is joined by new guests in each episode to share inspiring stories and challenge the listener to continue transforming humanity one word and one act of kindness at a time. Be sure to stop by mypowerofone.com and join the movement at mypowerofone on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Welcome to the Wizard of One podcast, sponsored by Heartland Films, Inc. and My Power of One. Those both can be found at www.mypowerofone.com and www.suevicory.com. And thank you for joining us today in our 13th episode of the Wizard of One. Today I am interviewing Kady LaPorte, who has been... Hi, Kady. who has been my producer for the podcast since the beginning. And we have been on this journey together, as I like to call it, adventure, and both learned a lot about the process of podcasting and enjoyed it very much. But Kady, who is 25, is a lifelong resident of Lynn County, Kansas. She grew up practicing archery with her family and passionately pursuing academia. She considers herself to be a permanent student of life. Kady has spent 19 of her 25 years in academia and has her master's degree in communications from Pitt State, right?
Yes. Yep.
But she's learned just as much outside of the classroom as she has within it. She spends any free moment she can find with a good book and her dog. Sage.
Yes.
Let's throw that in. There was a comma there, Sage. Kady has been blessed with many people who actively inspire and encourage her, including yours truly, Sue Vicory, during the last year working together. Welcome, Kady.
Hi.
This is an honor to be interviewing you today. I know that you have no idea what questions I'm about ready to throw in your direction, which is how I wanted it, correct?
Mildly terrified,
That's
but go
right.
ahead.
The thing that's cool about our last year is that I challenged you on a couple of different fronts. One was to interview Dee Wallace, which was felt like a pretty big deal because you were a fan of hers.
So much fun. So much fun.
So awesome. And you had to prepare the questions and, sit in my chair basically for what turned out to be an extraordinary conversation with Dee. And that's like a forever thing that you will have that as your memory. So that was awesome. Another thing I challenged Kady with was driving here and meeting me at the studio.
Somehow more daunting than my interview with Dee Wallace.
Right. When you live in a small town like we do, driving in the city is scary for most people. Yeah, it's a lot. Not for me, but it is a lot because we lived up here.
Most, if not all, of that fear was gone the second time around.
Oh, nice. I'm glad that I did that.
I knew what I was getting myself into.
Yeah. Which is true just in general, just like driving
anywhere. The first time is terrifying. The second time is...
Yeah, it's different traffic.
Also terrifying, but it feels a lot different. Yeah.
More familiar, and you hit up the mall and Barnes & Noble, so you got
just as long as I keep to my routine of this is where I'm going when I get there and going to the mall, and once I get there, I can reward myself with books. So
well, it builds confidence
that
you can still be afraid of something and actually conquer it in some fashion, right? Yes. That's just true all the days of our lives. So I know you're anxiously awaiting this interview with me today and probably thinking about it in the middle of the night. But here's a few questions that I'm curious about over the past 11 months that we've worked together. What were your expectations and your concerns and your anticipations last January when you accepted my offer to co-create this podcast together? Because we met at the coffee shop and we, you came all dressed nicely and brought your resume and everything. Did you go home and think, uh-oh, what did I just commit to?
Well, we've talked about that meeting a lot in retrospect between the two of us, and I considered it to be an interview, but I learned later on that you didn't label it as an interview, and I think the more I look back on it, the more I think, okay, maybe it wasn't. Like, it felt like a get to know you conversation more than anything, not like you're trying to deem whether or not I'm worthy for this job. I almost felt like you had made that decision before you had even sat down with me, which I think provided me with some kind of comfort, I guess. I think I would say that I didn't have any expectations at all, because that's kind of the easiest way to approach life for me, because if you go into things with expectations, you can easily be disappointed or overwhelmed. So anything that you asked of me after you had deemed me worthy of this job was surprising, because I had a loose concept of what my responsibilities were going to be, but new things arose every month. I think after each podcast episode, we talked about like, oh, well, we didn't expect that to happen, but that was a fun learning experience. Like, and I didn't expect to develop such a deep interpersonal relationship with you. But I guess I probably should have, because I have a history of developing those kind of relationships with my mentor / bosses. As long as you're a good mentor / boss, I tend to develop a relationship outside of that. Of like, once I'm done with this job, I don't want this relationship to end. I want to be free to reach out to you for non-job related things once I'm done with this aspect of my life.
Well, and we did spend 2 hours every month in the car together, chatting our way up and chatting our way back, except for the couple that you drove yourself. And I know even this time I was like, she probably would like to have 2 hours in the car with me again, but I'm going to go ahead and challenge her to drive on her own one last time. Because I think next month we'll have a wrap-up. You and I can have a wrap-up convo, and then we can, let it all hang out with the good, bad, and whatever. If we haven't had any bad, really. And I don't make decisions in my left brain anyways. So I don't premeditate anything, ever. So for me to decide that you were a good match for this project was just instinctual. And that's just the way I operate my life, is I try to make decisions based on my soul, whatever has shown up that, we both learned together.
Yep.
We've had a process together. Hit for our audience a little bit the highlights of the podcast and running the podcast, because again, neither of us had done one before. And
No.
luckily, I knew Brad to come into the studio and get set up here, and that's really been fabulous. But also, we had some long-distance people, so we had to do some Zoom stuff. So tell our audience a little bit about some of the steps by which we took and you learned, and what we know now about podcast for somebody that might be considering taking on that task.
I would say first and foremost, if you plan on doing an interview through Zoom, expect the unexpected. And it's almost definitely not going to be flawless, because technology hardly ever is. And I would say for that exact reason, the Zoom interviews were the pitfall to this experience, just because there was no controlling that. Like, it was completely outside of us. And once we were already live, there wasn't really much we could do about like faulty internet connection or problems with Zoom. But I would also say no two conversations are going to be the same, and you have to prepare yourself for that. And you have to tailor the way you speak to somebody based on the person you are speaking to. And I don't know if we've ever talked about this on the podcast, but we do have scripts for each person that we bring into the studio. But I would say for the most part, we don't follow them. Like, we have a STEM question we ask at the beginning, but then depending on what answer we get to that question, we kind of let our interviewee guide the conversation for us. There are certain questions that pop up that we wouldn't even think to ask beforehand that just kind of come to us on the fly. And the questions that come to us that way and the answers we get from those questions sometimes end up being the very best content that we get out of our guests. So
And we've only had to edit one
yes.
of our podcast,
Yeah.
and it was requested.
Yeah.
But other than that, we've just let them fly from beginning to
Yep.
end, and whatever the conversation turned into was what it was meant to be.
Authentic. 100%
Right.
authentic.
And no different than meeting a friend at a coffee shop
Yeah.
and talking about life and just, kind of taking all the left and right turns in the conversation. But it's been, the thing that's kind of interesting is the guests that we've chosen, or the guests that I've chosen, because they're all over the map. We've had some people that have ice cream stores in California. We have got people that have run Boston marathons. We really had a cross section of humans, which is what turns me on. It's just all ages and all. We had a 7-year-old,
Yes.
which for me was kind of the most challenging, because how do I engage a 7-year-old in a conversation that's more than 3-word answers and stuff like that? So we learned all of those steps of what to do, what not to do. One of the things Kady did for me as a producer, she kept me on task. She had a whiteboard at the beginning where she would write things on and say, watch your time, or talk about kindness or whatever. So that's one of the responsibilities of being a producer, was that. Plus, she did all the, you did the scripts pretty much.
Yes.
We got bios from everybody, and you prepared the questions and scripts.
Well, you love the number 5, so I tried to give you 5 questions each time for each guest, and then we would kind of work off of each other in what we contributed to the scripts. So I would proofread bios, I guess, make them more readable for airing, and then write questions for each one of the guests, which it was easier to write those questions. I would say the least I knew the guest, the easier it was to write the questions, and the more I knew them, the harder it was, because I had gone into it with prior knowledge. So I don't know what other people are interested in because I already know this person. So
Like Stephen Toll,
Yes.
for instance,
Yeah.
because you've had tattoos with him.
yes.
And so you knew him a little more than most of the other guests. But, we've just had some unique people at the mic, and it's just been, we've gotten to know them, our audience has gotten to know them, and it's just been a journey of fun, I think, which is, my primary
Adventure.
and it's my primary goal in life, actually, and it has been as long as I can remember. So was there anything particularly hard or daunting other than driving yourself to Kansas City? Was there anything that you grew through, or that you maybe wished wasn't part of the job description, even though there was no job description? You know what I mean?
I almost feel like nobody is going to believe me when I give my answer to this question, but I think the main thing I learned was failure is okay. And sometimes failure is fun. Like you just learn from the oops moments. Like
We did have a few of those, didn't we?
I don't know why I'm getting emotional about it, but like when I did my interview with Dee Wallace, I was terrified. But once I was into it, I was fine. She was so much fun to talk to. But I don't regret being nervous about it, because I think that made me try harder. And once you aired it, I had my dad listen to it, and
Are
he's
you
like,
crying?
I'm not crying. It's
Yes, you are.
I had my dad listen to it, and he's like, I think there's something wrong. And I'm like, what do you mean there's something wrong? I interviewed Dee Wallace. Don't tell me something's wrong. He's like, I think you published the wrong tape. And I'm like, what do you mean we published the wrong tape? He's like, well, she says we're not recording yet. But clearly you are recording, because I heard it. So I'm like frantically trying to contact you, and I'm like, Sue, I think you published the unedited version, and you're like, oh, well, that's fun.
That's correctable.
That's an adventure. And I'm like, Dee Wallace shared this on her Facebook to like tens of thousands of people. So like, if you could fix that, that would be great.
And I did, didn't I?
Yes.
I fixed it. Yeah. Well, one of the things I did want to do with you, and maybe we'll do a little bit of it in December, is I wanted you to learn the behind-the-scenes sort of pieces that go together to make this happen. And each guest, of course, we said we asked for a bio and a headshot, so we had that. And then we did a Google folder by which we dropped things, and you and I could each access them. After every podcast, I'd have Kady listen to it, which obviously the D one you didn't.
I listened
you
to
did,
the edit. You put the edited one in the
I
Google
know.
Drive. You didn't put the unedited one in the Google Drive, which
Gotcha.
was why I.
Yeah. So, like in life, you know, the snafus make for fun stories and conversations, and trust me, I've got plenty of them over the last 20 years. But so we've learned a lot together. We have dedicated the word adventure to our wild conversations, and have had plenty of laughs. And you know, we live in the same town, so there's that. But we did learn one of the things I want to teach you next month is the behind the scenes pieces. Now, Photoshop, you know, when I create the marketing pieces for each one, and I decide on what word to call that their word. And I have to make it in a square. I have to make it in several different sizes, and then the uploading of it to lip sync. And then, you know, all those pieces are kind of the mechanics of actually getting it to the public. So I'm thinking next month maybe we'll have a couple hours in that avenue, because it's good to know, you know.
The adventure continues.
The adventure is like a forever thing. One of the reasons we started this, or I started it, was to continue the conversation about kindness for the My Power of One brand. And it's sort of, I don't know if it's a difficult question or not, but it's one we've asked every single one of our guests, is to define the word kind. And we've had different answers from everybody, so it's been kind of fascinating. So I'm going to throw that one in your ballpark over there and let you tell me after 11 months what's your interpretation of kindness.
I feel like you might have lofty expectations of my answer to this question, considering I've had 12 or 13 months to prepare an answer. But I think simplicity probably works better to define the big words in the English language. I would say benevolent action with good intention towards yourself and others.
I like that you made it full circle like that.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than all giving out, that it's receiving as well.
And it starts with you. You have to be kind to yourself before you can be kind to others.
To be a kind human.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's all the little actions that one takes that, you know, is a zillion different ways to do that on any given day, but being intentional about it as well. So the word kind is kind of the basis of this, the Wizard of One podcast. And one of the things that the brand stands for is Random Acts of Kindness. And we have, from the inception of it, which is about 8.5 years ago now, made our presence has been in a community or in the world accomplishing random acts of kindness. So together, you and I are going to come up with one for our audience. And I like them to be broad enough that anybody listening in California or New York will like, oh, hey, I can do that. We've had some pretty interesting ones, but what are your thoughts?
Well, you know that I guess my passion is reading. I love having a book in my hands. I'm the most authentic version of myself when I have a book in my hands. So I think my challenge is to take a book and let intention drive you, I guess. Whether it's to read to a child or to donate books to a library or donate books to a used bookstore, just do good with books, I guess. Because I feel like books have changed my life. And,
nice.
and it's more impactful to start early. Put a book in a child's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you did that recently with a book thing that you did online. Tell us what that was about.
Usborne Books. My best friend is, I don't know if you'd call it an advocate. She runs parties, online parties for distribution of Usborne books. And my niece and nephew and other niece are absolutely obsessed with these books. Like when my niece was really, really little, you could not get her to sit down and listen to a book, and that was my absolute favorite thing to do, is to read to kids, because you will not believe the things that they absorb when they are sitting down and listening to people reading out loud. But she wouldn't do it. She's a spitfire, and now that's all she wants to do. She wants to read all the time, and it's just incredible.
How old is she?
6.
So interesting. Okay, so now she's really grasped the value of having a book in your hand and going on the adventure, the imagination of the story. I think it's a huge asset to raising children or teaching or whatever is keeping the influence of, the old days. We'd go to the library and we'd study at the library looking up stuff in the periodicals, and today you can do it on the internet, so it's really a different world by which hard copy books are, probably less frequented. I don't know.
Well, and a lot of the Usborne books are interactive,
right?
To where like the kids can play with flaps, or like you can shine a flashlight through the page, and like it's just a very tactile experience for the kids,
and great for the imagination.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the random acts of kindness we did in the town that we live in, Kady and I live in, is we put up a little free library. And that is, people bring books from around the community and put them in all different ages and stuff like that. And it stayed pretty active. So the random act of kindness that we're co-creating together is something connected to books, either reading to
kids, donating books to the library, putting books in the free library we have in Lynn County would be awesome.
Or any county
yes.
in the United States. There's a lot of them around. I think that is a perfect match for you, considering your passion for reading and the solitude and everything that it provides you. Have you ever considered writing a book? It's not on my questions, but it's coming up because you like books so much.
I really hope my junior college mentor, Clayton Whitson, ends up hearing this. But his passion project at the time was bugging me to write my own book. Because around the time I got baptized, I was writing what I called the Trinity Journal, and like my journey with God, and he was just so moved by what I was doing with that. But a lot of the time that I'm writing, I'm doing it for me and me only.
Like a journal.
And I feel like, yes, and I feel like if someone else were to read that and to my terror critique that, it would take some of the magic out of it for me.
Agree.
And the therapy out of it for me. And I know a lot of people make their living on writing, but I can't imagine depending on my ability to write to make a living. It would just suck all the fun out of writing for me.
Interesting. Yeah, because one of our guests this year was Trudy Ludwig, who has been writing children's books and publishing children's books for 20 years, I think now, and then she does make a living that way. So it's interesting, different perspectives on career choices and things like that. Your degree in communications, what was your undergraduate degree in?
So my emphasis area was human communication, which is incredibly difficult for me to explain to people because they restructured the department while I was almost all the way through it.
Is this at Pitt State?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think there were 5 umbrella areas to emphasis in the communications department when I started. And then as time moved on, multimedia journalism kind of became a thing of the past, and they had to restructure that. So like certain umbrella areas kind of got braided together into one, and then human communication kind of got born through that process of people are forgetting how to talk to each other, just in general.
Which is kind of what we're doing now.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
In person.
And there was a thing that people are garnering more and more interest in as time moves on, health communication. and like how to talk to patients in a clinical environment and working on bedside manner and
People skills.
and I just felt like human communication was the broadest area to sit in. And while I was interested in all of the emphasis areas, human communication felt like the one that had the most wiggle room, to where I could kind of do what you do with your life and just kind of like bounce around.
Meander.
But still be applicable to whatever situation I was in, because who can't use human communication? I mean,
Good point. Yeah.
hopefully we're all human and
Yeah.
we need to know how to communicate with each other. So
That's true. Yeah, I mean, it's got, as you say, it's got lots of tentacles.
Yeah.
That could show up at each decade of your life, something slightly different, but all still be under the umbrella of communicating to humans. Yeah. So your undergraduate degree and your master's degree were both in that?
Yes.
Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I originally went to school to be a high school English teacher, and that was very short-lived because I realized I didn't want to spend my life reading research papers and tearing apart other people's research papers.
Does sound boring.
And yeah, I was raised by a teacher, so like I have, I guess, secondhand experience as to what that looks like. And I was a teacher's assistant when I was a senior in high school, so I was spending an hour every single day reading research papers written by freshman boys.
Oh God. Sorry.
I'll just give you a moment of silence to just imagine what that was like.
Probably entertaining.
I enjoyed grading vocabulary tests. I absolutely loved vocabulary tests, and anyone who had Miss Blythe in high school probably is rolling their eyes hearing that, because most people hated those vocabulary tests. But those were my wheelhouse, because like you, I absolutely love words and dissecting words and learning about words. But research papers, I am euphoric about the fact that I will never again have to write a research paper, because I that was just not my thing. But
Interesting. So you had to write a thesis though for your master's degree, correct?
I did not.
Really?
Actually. You could either do that, or you could take your comprehensive exams.
Oh.
And I chose to take my comprehensive exams, because I was so much better about taking tests than I was about writing papers. And with a thesis, you have to do original research, which is so much more complicated than just regurgitating other people's research, which was also a pain in the neck to do. So
you know me fairly well from the last 11 months we've been working together. But when I was in graduate school, my father died in the middle of that, and I missed one day in the 2 years, and it was for his funeral. So my thesis turned out to be the automation of W.F. Norman, our family business, and it was a tribute to my father. So obviously I got an A on it because of the emotional value.
personal connection
Correct.
to it.
Yeah. So it was, that was like doing a term paper, as they all are. But it was fairly easy because of just the circumstance that, I was in, and a flawless 2 years of grad school. Have you ever thought about a PhD? Because I have, so I'm wondering if you have.
Have I thought about it? Absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
Have I done anything more than thought about it? No. Because I went through my master's program really just by coincidence, because I kind of applied for graduate school just on a whim, and I said, if someone offers to pay me to be here, I'll stay. If not, I will just consider that to be the universe telling me that I've done what I needed to do and it's time to move on. And I had all but made the decision not to go to graduate school, because they said that all the teaching assistant jobs had been filled. And then I get a phone call over Christmas break saying that one of the teaching assistants had to drop out for a family emergency, and they need an emergency person to fill that slot, and that I'm the most reasonable person to put in that position. I'm like, well, crap. I mean, I've already made a life decision here, and now you're making me rewrite what I want to do. But I jumped on it, and it wasn't in my emphasis area. It was in theater, so I didn't know what I was doing. I spent the vast majority of my time cataloging patterns for clothes that they were designing in the theater department, and that's most definitely not what I went to school to do. But it was quiet. It provided me a lot of alone time, which was cathartic. They were paying me probably more than I deserved to be paid, and I was going to school and being paid to go to school, which is like my dream because I absolutely love being a student. But I couldn't have wrote that into my future. Like some other being had written that into my future for me. And then after I got done with a semester in theater, we got shut down because of COVID. And I got moved into the research department, and you could probably see on my face how enthusiastic I was about being moved into the research department. And then I got moved into the broadcasting department, which was also not what I went to school to do. But I got a lot of experience. Like a lot of experience by being bounced around so much as a teaching assistant. And I loved each one of those jobs for very different reasons. But after being bounced around so much, I was burnt, done. And I absolutely love Pitt State, and I knew if I wanted to get a PhD, I would have to go somewhere else. And I didn't want to have to get used to a different group of people. Like, once I get used to people, those people become my family, and I don't know how to insert myself into a new environment. I had already done it so many different times. I didn't want to do it again. And in case you didn't already know, PhDs are expensive. You don't get your PhD for free. That doesn't happen. So, yeah, I'm done. I only spent one semester where I actually had to use my own money to pay tuition. Everything else was paid for, and I didn't want to have to pull more money out of the bank for a degree that I didn't need. So
one of the things I loved that was attractive about a PhD program was you can sort of custom design them for your specific interest. Different colleges will let you say, hey, I'd like to have it in kindness with the emphasis on puppy dogs, or I'm just exaggerating, but you can really custom craft your studies to match who you are at that time of
there
your
are
life.
2 D words that absolutely terrify me.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is death, and the other one is dissertation.
Okay, gotcha.
So no PhD for me, thanks.
Okay. Well, you are 25, so you've got a lot of decades left for life adventures, and really what you were describing about being jacked around to different aspects of communication, that's kind of just how life shows up. It's like, hey, here's an opportunity. Do you want to step in or not? Just like you working with me for the past 11 months. Had no idea what that was going to turn out to be, but it's turned out to be pretty fun.
I would rather go back and get another master's degree in a different field than get a PhD.
That's common too. Yeah, at least for now.
Yeah.
Again, you're just 25.
I can't imagine growing into wanting to write a dissertation, though. Just not seeing that in my future.
Well, and you didn't write a thesis either for your master's degree, so see, you
but
were able to route around
you
that.
can't avoid a dissertation. Like, there's no option. It's unless they just completely restructured how you get your PhD, then I'm good for now.
Everything is possible.
Yeah.
So that's my life mantra. So we talked about a random act of kindness revolving around books and donating books, reading to children, going to the library and donating your time. And we defined the word kindness a little bit for our audience, which is always a big topic for me. One of the things I really liked working with you, and I've told you this before, first of all, I found that, no surprise, that your communication skills have been exemplary. And what that means is if I text you or usually message you in some way, I hear back from you almost right away, unless you're sleeping or,
or engrossed in a book.
Driving or something like that. But your communication skills, and I've talked about this when I speak at colleges and stuff like that, how high on the list that is for me for communicating, responding, even if it just says, I got your message, thanks, or something like that, in today's, digital world of communicating. So your communication skills, top of the list. which is a huge compliment and something that is just a characteristic of who you are. The other thing I really liked about you, and it's just who I am as well, is your follow-through. So if I were to say to you, would you listen to the podcast and send me any notes? Within a half a day or so, that was done. And obviously, you've got time to do it, but it's also choosing time to do it. And so the way us working together was really a good match, because I'm very task-oriented. And but I wanted to give you enough things to learn, so as a producer as well. So high marks on both of those characteristics, and my opinion is that they'll serve you well on your journey all the years of your life. Keep those two things in mind, because they really stuck out for me.
Shout out to my parents and my grandparents for raising me that way, because punctuality has always been like a huge deal. Like, don't keep people waiting on you. Like, just don't do it. You don't like waiting on other people, so don't make other people wait on you.
Right. Value their time.
Yeah.
And that's one of the funny stories we have between us is punctuality.
Who's going to be the earliest?
Well, that's part of it. But one time I told you 9 o'clock, and when I would pick you up, and I showed up at 9:30 or something.
I was
Remember
standing
that?
at the end of the driveway at 8:45. Like, where is Sue?
Which never happens.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you were just driving around Mound City trying to kill
killing time. Exactly.
I was standing at the end of my driveway waiting on you, and you were just driving around town killing time.
Yeah, to show up just at the exact right time, which is what I was doing today, too, because I had extra time. I thought, well, I don't want to sit in the parking lot. So
I was already in the parking lot.
You were already here. So we have a lot of things in common with, what we value. And as you say, time is an important commodity. And valuing other people's time is showing respect. So that's something that also is important to me anyways. So those are the two things that were really noteworthy, and I've shared those with you before, is your communication skills spot on, and your follow-through is exemplary. So that's Sue's critique of Kady. Here's a good one. What would you like to ask me by way of advice as you venture out into the world?
Oh, God.
Take a moment to think about it, because I'll expect an answer for that one.
I know. You always expect an answer. That doesn't make the answer easy.
What would you like to ask me by way of advice as you venture out into the world?
I mean, I know what I want to ask, but I don't know how to ask it, I guess. I think...
Just come up with some words, and then I'll get the gist of it.
My biggest struggle in life is determining my own value to other people. Just point blank determining my value to other people, but also, like, in a professional sense, I don't know how to discuss money with other people. I've just been raised to think that money is an uncomfortable conversation to have with anybody. So even when the situation calls for it, how do you talk about that with other people? How do you fight for yourself in a monetary sense?
Well, fight's not a word I'd use, because that's
advocate for
yourself.
yourself.
A much better word. And one of the things in the last 10 years I've felt like I'd like to do is make a documentary about money, because people have beliefs. Everybody has beliefs about money, value, and across the world. And it really determines so many things about how you make a living and how money comes towards you. I just met with a gal before I came here, and that was one of her questions is, I've got some opportunities. How do I monetize those? People that make films, how do I raise money for those? So it's a big conversation. But valuing yourself is determined by you or me or any of us, and it can change on a dime, but it doesn't hurt to overvalue whatever you think your value is. And because all anybody can say is, hey, absolutely, sign my contract. Or they can say, well, I was thinking about this. So I would recommend that you always start a conversation with what in your mind consider overvalue. So let's just say you get an opportunity to go produce another podcast in Fort Scott.
I would love to, and I'm available.
There we go.
For anyone who's listening.
There we go. I was trying to make it comfortable for you, so that's why I made it Fort Scott. And so you've already had a year of experience. And so you know the drill a little bit more than you did 11 months ago. So at this point, you could say, how many hours would you like me to commit to it? Because, we've had a fairly loose schedule for us in the last year. And then, or maybe let them know how many hours you think it'll take you to sort of accomplish whatever their goals. Because a lot of people do podcasts once a week, once a day. We're doing one a month. So you kind of know the drill at this point. So you could sort of put an outline together and say it's going to take 20 hours a week. And for me, I do research and see what other people are being paid for a similar type of thing. And then just say, would love to do it. Come on as a producer. Here's my requirements. And just let it go like that, because all they can do is say yes or no.
Right.
But, I think it's good to overvalue whatever you think that could be. Sky's the limit. And, people have the option to say, well, maybe I can go 3/4 of that or whatever. But I would recommend that you start here and then be surprised at how the outcome comes. And you're going to learn. We all learn all the time about what people are willing to do but as you're building your resume, as you're building your now that you're what was your latest title?
Wardrobe coordinator
that
and COVID compliance officer.
See, those kind of showed up randomly in the midst of all
on
of
an independent film.
Correct.
One of the most interesting weeks of my life.
So far.
Yes.
So far. So, yeah, it's kind of fun to see what shows up in the midst of not expecting it, too. I think it would behoove you to overestimate. But, you've got some experience now, so you know what it's taken to do this. I do want to spend some time with you on the backside to show you how the different pieces go, so you've got that in your bag of tricks as well. So I would advise you, as you venture out into the world, to overestimate by 20%. I'm just throwing a number out there. Surprising I didn't say 55%. By whatever maybe the market value is for the same position. And then come up with a one sheet on this is what I am capable of doing. These are, this is how many hours I think I'll spend on it. And even maybe doing a range wouldn't be bad as well. Saying, from this to this is where I feel like I fit in, and letting it be just that. And then, and letting the chips fall where they may. So overvaluing doesn't hurt at all.
Right.
Rather than undervaluing. So, and as you accumulate experience and your resume grows, then, obviously that is, but it's a subject that most people struggle with.
Yeah.
How do I get money? How do I pay for this? And I think it's something that we've all talked about in the industry of creation, which is
and we've talked together about how money, as long as I'm enjoying what it is that I'm doing, money is really the least of my motivation. But if I hate what I'm doing, then the value of money goes up, because I'm like, if you're gonna irritate me or cause unnecessary stress in my life, then the money value goes up for me, I guess. So.
Right, and I encourage people all the time to do what you love. Now, first of all, you got to determine what that is.
Yeah.
So if you're going to spend your time in this world, all the days of your life, why not spend it within a passion that you're passionate about? And for you, obviously, it's books, and we've talked about, what could happen in your future. But do what you love is sort of the biggest single thing I would say to any human, as many days as you can of your life, and you'll never regret. They like to say money will follow, and I think money follows if you allow it to. For me, I've said as an adult my whole life is I flow money. So that's a mantra. I flow money. And I've noticed that I do. Always had high-paying jobs, and always, it's like a magic wand, but it's a belief that I have, and I've seen it come true. So be careful about what beliefs that you surround yourself with. That's a good one for you, though. I flow money. I encourage people to say that a lot. Yeah. And you got to believe it.
Seems just a little bit too hip hop for you, Sue, though.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's perfect for me.
You give off hippie vibes, so to hear you say something so hip hop's a little.
Yeah, I do though. I flow money, and that's been.
You need a shirt.
My entire life has been proof of that. So, whatever you think you want in the world, make that a mantra of some sort, and say it as often as you can. randomly to people, even if they're strangers. If you're sitting on a bus and you're like driving through Kansas City, oh, by the way, I flow money. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But honestly, if you got to say it out loud and then, to own it and then watch what shows up for it. That's just how life has been for me. All right. So we talked about advice. If you were to sit on my Make-A-Wish secret swing, what would you wish for today?
I don't know why the first thing that popped into my mind is the Chiefs being in the Super Bowl and winning the Super Bowl. I mean,
go with it.
If I'm making the wish now, then I'm wishing for now. So short-lived dreams, but long-lived dreams, I guess. I would say that my professional life just continues to keep happening to me the way this job happened to me, because I consider this job to be a blessing, and I wasn't actively looking for it, but you are actively looking for me. So I guess I would wish that the people who need me find me.
So we were actively looking for each other, and not intentionally so much as that randomly, which is how everything shows up. And so I created the position because I could. And I created the possibility of a podcast because what the heck?
Yeah.
I've not done a podcast. Let's do a podcast. Hey, she's available. Do you want to be a producer? And that's how I do with everybody. Is like, here, you got a new title. You're a producer. And it just is a fun way to learn things and sort of be whimsical about, what's next. And for me, there's always a new creative thing that's next. And that's how I entertain myself. But, and I keep showing up at what's next. So we found each other, and no accident.
Nope.
We had a blast together, and we learned about the word fab.
Yes.
And that was a bonding experience.
Yes.
So I like your first wish, though, by the way, about the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So let's stick with that one for now.
Okay. That's my selfless wish.
That's a big wish for a lot of people, and you and I are sort of equal fans of that group there. All right. Well, what's one takeaway from our time together you will fondly remember in future years? Give it a little time to think about it. What is one takeaway from our time together you will fondly remember in future years? Besides telling me not to drink my drink right into the microphone so you can hear it.
I think I'm just going to parrot something that I already said, that failure can sometimes be fun. Let failure be fun. Don't let failure define you. Learn from it, pick yourself up, and keep moving.
Yeah, redefine what failure means, actually. Failure is adventure.
Correct? Doing something that you didn't intend to do, or something that conflicts against your objective. But that doesn't have to be the end. Doesn't have to be the end of the world. Just figure out how to correct it, learn from it, keep going.
Absolutely. I mean, what's the choice? I mean, besides jumping off a cliff.
Other than having a meltdown, which
usually
is
true.
my tendency.
Not mine. No. I find everything is entertaining. And also defining failure is subjective.
Yeah.
So it's defined by the individual. I think I had someone ask me what my failures were, and I'm like, I don't have any. Because, it's a matter of opinion on what you consider failures are. Has fear ever stood in the way of you and reaching a goal or a task that...
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. For sure.
And so recommendation would be do it anyways, or what it is it is a showstopper, or
determine how important it is to you.
That's good.
Is it more important to you than your mental health? Can you overcome what it's doing to your mental health? Do you find yourself capable of overcoming what it is doing to your anxiety, your stress level?
Like losing sleep over it and
If
things
you
like
don't
that.
feel that you are capable of overcoming that, move on. Find a different goal.
That seems
If
valid.
you think that you are capable of surmounting that and your goal is important enough to fight for that, then fight for it with everything you have.
I like that. Yeah. And that's from decade to decade. You'll probably, grow through some of those and put some aside and never look at them again. What word describes our relationship over the past year? Word, singular.
Our relationship specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to find the opposite of judgmental, like accepting, open. There's doesn't really seem like there's any subject that's off limits with us. Spontaneous. Yeah, and I've never thought that word defines me as a person, but I definitely see that in the relationship that you and I have. Unconventional.
Coming on some good ones here.
But I had a word that was resting heavy on me last night to define you specifically.
All right, I'm ready.
Sue.
I'm ready.
Unwavering.
Unwavering.
Or relentless. In the most positive way possible, because I feel like relentless has very negative connotations in certain contexts. But you are like a dog with a bone. Once you determine what is important to you, nothing can shake you.
Correct.
And I want more of that.
Nice.
In my life.
I like that. That is a big compliment. Not so much for me and complimenting me, but that you see that as something that's attainable and that that you want to expand into for just life's adventures. And I'm sure you'll always remember this, talking about the adventure that we've had, because that's the trajectory of my entire adult life. The word that I used for my interview in May was audacious, and I had to look it up and understand what it meant. But once I did, I'm like, yeah, that pretty much is who I've become as an adult. And as a child, too. So unwavering and relentless, unconventional, spontaneous, open and accepting are the words that we just talked about. Tree told me one time that I was random. And I thought, wow, yes, correct.
Quirky.
Quirky is another good word.
Kook.
And then...
You know how much I love kook.
Yes. Oh, we're getting some good words here, girl. I like it when there's lots of different meanings for them, too. My editor that I had for 10 years said I was crazy. And I'm like, boy, he knows me pretty well. I took that as a huge compliment. So I think we've really, you and I have had a great experience, equally so.
Yes.
From beginning to, through the end of this year. Your future, I'm looking at my clock, we got about 8 minutes. Your future from here, you're going to attract some more opportunities randomly that take you down a farther road of communication. We did talk about a bookstore.
Yep.
I guess there's ways to combine a bookstore, a used bookstore, with other things. Just the random act of kindness, which is reading to kids and getting the community involved and things like that. Are there any other things in the next 5 years that you would like to see yourself reach for?
Well, I'd just like to say that I was surprised by how much I enjoyed doing this job, because this is not what I went to school for. Like, broadcasting, podcasting was just not what I saw myself doing, but I feel like it's very modern, very applicable to the society we're living in. I can picture myself like doing a YouTube series just for fun. No monetary value needs to be assigned to that, but just for my entertainment and the entertainment of others. Like, I can imagine, like, mounting a camera on your dashboard and just recording the conversations that we've had to and from the studio. Just people listening to us, just like...
What would we name it? What would that YouTube...
That's... I'm going to
it
need a couple minutes to sit on
it?
that.
It needs a name, yeah.
I feel like we need to incorporate fab in there somewhere, really.
I think you're right. I think fab needs to be part of the titling. And maybe the primary, one of the primary gals.
We could just title it Fab and let it be a mystery.
Fab.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And then just tackle all kinds of
But then we need our tattoos that I've talked about relentlessly for the last 11-ish months. 4. Yeah.
Up to 4?
And you keep saying you're going to get one, but I'm still waiting.
Well, on your 5th one, have you thought about what you're going to do on the magic 5th tattoo?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you?
Yeah.
Tell me
Steven
what it is.
and I have already talked about it.
All
yeah.
right. Do we get to know or not? Is it going to be a surprise? Any hints?
Well, it's just because, like, I've changed my mind last minute so many different times.
Right.
And, like, end up getting something completely different.
Sounds like me.
But I found something online that it's, like, half of a lion's face and half sunflower, and it's divided down the middle by an arrow. I'm a Leo, so that's where the lion comes from, and I've always had like an affinity towards sunflowers for whatever reason. And then the arrow is for my archery background. Right. I just like randomly found it on the internet, and something about it just really spoke to me. So
I guess I knew that your birthday was in August, but
August 5th.
Of course. But Taurus, which is what I am, and Leos are lined up.
Yep.
You know, Jay's a Leo. So
5. Magic 5. It's always the magic 5.
Everything's about 5 in life, I think is the way I look at it. Well, I do want to say as we close today, I'd like to personally thank you for your time and talents over the past year. We've had a blast.
Do we have like 30 more seconds? Because I have a shout out for my niece for Christmas.
We got 3 minutes, but let me finish the ending here, and then you can have the final minute. As producer of this podcast, Kady, we have both learned a great deal together, and which is exactly why we did it. We've had a lot of laughs and a lot of stories that we've shared. The extra bonus of working narrative film together adds another layer of adventure in the past week or so. And who knows what's next with Sue. Wizard of One has been brought to you by My Power of One and Heartland Films, Inc., and you can visit those on the website mypowerofone.com or SueVicory.com. We've talked about a random act of kindness connected to books, and we'd like to challenge our audience to do something in donating or reading at a library. We talked about the definition of the word kindness, and guess what? I'm going to come up with a word from what we've talked about today when I do your final marketing.
Well, I have a word of my own. That's what I wanted to talk about.
I'm ready.
I want to donate my word to my niece. I've had this plan for like the last 8 months. My word is destiny.
Great.
My niece's name is Destiny.
Perfect.
And I want to make the word white.
Oh, white. I was going to ask that. You know I was going to ask that.
Because I asked her what her favorite color was, and she said all the colors.
Oh, yeah.
And then she said pink and blue, like that was all one word.
How old is she?
6.
Okay.
And
is her name Destiny?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
So I decided the word is white, and that she can change the color of the shirt to where the word can go with her.
So
as
we
she
need
ages.
some child sizes for that as well.
Yes.
Then, yeah. Destiny is a fan. What's her middle name?
Ray. Destiny Ray.
Destiny Ray. That's a word that I think speaks to all of us, really, or has a potential to speak to all of us. That for me, when I went to film school, I stepped into my destiny, and I've never been able to step back out.
The word itself has always had a huge impact on my life. So the fact that my niece carries that word as her name, just.
Where does she live?
Butler.
In Butler.
Yep.
So destiny is our word.
Not my brother's daughter, my best friend's daughter.
Correct.
So I chose her. She was not given to me. I chose her. I feel like that's important to say.
Right. But destiny will be the word we'll put into the brand. It'll be the logo itself will be white, but it'll be offering a lot of different colors for the shirts. We'll probably do it in adult sizes, children's sizes.
Yes, 'cause I want one too.
Yeah. And long sleeved and whatever we can put into the brand, and I'll probably have it in there by this weekend sometime. But your actual podcast will go live. It's 2:00, so we're going to close out. But your podcast will go live next month, And it'll be our 13th one, season 1, the final one of the year. And it was a complete honor to, we did pretty well, didn't we?
Yes.
Wasn't too nerve-wracking. We got through all the questions. I took a few notes, so that's exciting. Any final comments you'd like to say before we close out?
It's a bittersweet goodbye. For sure.
I think that sums it up.